A 38-year-old woman became involved with a much younger university student, eventually exploiting him for her own benefit. At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to a career woman working at a fairly famous magazine in Paris. She is Elis, a single parent with an extremely busy job. Elis works in the editorial department, and at that time she was in Brazil to assist with the printing of a magazine that would be published in a few weeks. However, she seemed unhappy with the print result because the color was different from when it was still on the computer. Elis didn't want this to ruin her performance because she wanted to meet her targets so she could be promoted to a higher position. Elis is a very busy person. That day she also had to return to Paris to report to her boss. Not forgetting, she brought a gift for her child in the form of a very large doll. Because she still looked very beautiful and approachable, it was not uncommon for men to seek her attention. Unfortunately, Elis is very busy and has no time for romance. On the plane, a handsome young man was seen on the same flight as Elis. He is Baltazar, an engineering student who just happened to be on vacation in Brazil. Baltazar had trouble getting his seat because a small child was occupying it. Even though he asked nicely, he was ignored until a flight attendant invited him and found him another seat. Baltazar was then given a seat next to Alice. While Baltazar was engrossed in his flight, Elis was still busy with her work. Until at one point, the plane they were on experienced turbulence that was enough to scare the passengers. In her panic, Alice unconsciously held Baltazar's hand very tightly. However, Baltazar didn't mind. Only after the turbulence ended did Elis realize and quickly pull her hand away. A few hours after the incident, they finally arrived in France. Before parting, Baltazar introduced himself to Elis, but Alice seemed to be in a hurry. In her rush, Elis dropped a flash drive containing her work files. Baltazar found it and tried to chase Alice. Unfortunately, Elis had already gone far. Elis was picked up by her sister, who likes to match Alice with single men. Even though Alice can't think about it at all, Elis immediately went to her office and met her boss. Competition at work sometimes made Alice uncomfortable, but she had to keep fighting and give her best for her work. After a few minutes of talking with her boss, it seemed that Alice's performance was still inferior compared to one of her colleagues. Her boss was still not satisfied with Elis's work and said that her work was no longer up to date and too forced to be displayed. In fact, Alice's boss moved Alice to a department with less work. Elis, who didn't want and was disappointed, went home immediately. Elis went to her ex-husband's house. Even though they were divorced, they still maintained a good relationship. The next day, Elis was still at work. She wanted to do something, but she couldn't find important files until finally she got a message from her friend that her flash drive was found by a man named Baltazar. Alice immediately contacted Baltazar, who sounded very noisy. Apparently, Baltazar was hanging out with his friends. Alice then invited him to meet. She immediately went to meet Baltazar at his hangout. Elis was immediately greeted by Baltazar and invited into his hangout. Elis, in a hurry, immediately asked for her flash drive, but Baltazar said that the flash drive was not here, but at his house. So they left the venue and went to Baltazar's house using his pink motorcycle. Seeing this, Elis was a bit confused. Maybe she was embarrassed to go using that pink motorcycle. Moreover, she had difficulty wearing a helmet. However, Baltazar, who was kind-hearted, helped Elis put it on. At that time, from across the street, Elis's coworker saw their togetherness. Elis's friend thought they were kissing, whereas Baltazar was putting a helmet on Alice. They even took a picture of the incident and spread it on social media. Upon arriving at the house, Baltazar's father was seen with a woman. She is Baltazar's prospective mother, because his mother had left them a long time ago. They then introduced each other. Not wanting to linger, Elis immediately asked Baltazar for her flash drive. But again, Baltazar seemed to have trouble finding it. After finding her flash drive, Alice immediately wanted to go home. Baltazar actually wanted to get closer to Elis again, but Elis said that their age gap was too wide and Baltazar was not her type. So she apologized and left Baltazar. Because of this, Baltazar was a bit disappointed with Elis's words. The next day, at the office, Elis felt suspicious. Why was everyone laughing at her? Until finally one of her friends gave her a photo of Alice with Baltazar, who looked like they were kissing. This made Elis even more confused. Elis seemed to have almost lost her charm as she aged. almost reaching 40 years old. Even her boss no longer wanted to accept ideas from Alice that might seem outdated. The boss only wanted something fresh and crazier than that. That's when Elis lost her spirit, until one of her male friends gave Alice advice to try changing her appearance to be a bit wild. Because basically the boss likes things that are very wild, so she decided to make a major overhaul of herself. She also tried to dig into Balthazar's life, which she thought could help her. At first, Balthazar refused, but eventually Balthazar agreed. Balthazar is now invited by Alice to attend an official event attended by her colleagues. She did this so that her boss knew that she still had a young spirit with crazy thoughts. The first time Alice introduced Balthazar to her friends, she immediately received several taunts that made her embarrassed. But because Alice's mentality is not easily defeated, she again invited Balthazar to a model event attended by the bosses. This time she also wore more open clothes, so she could attract her boss's attention. When the event started, one of the models fell. Balthazar immediately helped her. The people there were confused by what Balthazar did. The changes made by Alice made the boss interested in seeing her again. The boss also likes the style of Alice's new boyfriend Balthazar. Alice invited Balthazar to dance together. The boss couldn't take his eyes off Alice. After that, Balthazar took Alice home. Arriving in front of her house, Balthazar tried to kiss her, but Alice diverted his attention and hurriedly said goodbye to Balthazar. Feeling something was missing, Balthazar then went to Alice's house just to say goodnight. But when they got there, they were carried away and ended up sleeping together. As a result of the incident, Alice had a more positive aura. Even her friend could sense that Alice had been messing around with a young man. Day by day, Alice was increasingly won over by Balthazar. Even though he only had a pink scooter, Balthazar managed to make Alice smile and feel comfortable. As a result, now Elis can provide cooler ideas than the others, and that makes her rivals a little annoyed. After her success in providing her ideas, she felt this unreal relationship should be stopped immediately. She just had to wait for the right time. That night, Balthazar invited her to drink together at the campus hall. Balthazar expressed his feelings that he wanted to be with Eli forever. However, Elis gently refused and said that their age gap was too wide. In 2 years she will be 40 years old, and that is not a good thing for her. So she ended her relationship with Balthazar. Day by day, her boss became happier. Meanwhile, Balthazar was still thinking about Elis's words and was very sad. Balthazar's father didn't want to see his son continue to suffer. He gave Balthazar a little enlightenment. He shouldn't think too much about one woman. Until a week later, Alice's office was visited by their director to see the percentage of ideas given by Alice. Initially it went well, but it seemed that the director did not like the male model in the picture. He asked to replace it. Several reference photos of male models were shown, but none were suitable. Until finally he saw a photo of Balthazar on Alice's laptop and asked him to be their model. With that, Alice initially disagreed, but because it was the director's need, they had to obey it. Alice then tried to contact Balthazar, but got no answer, until finally she visited the house that looked very messy. Balthazar seemed chaotic since breaking up with Alice. Because Alice was already at the front door, Balthazar's father then told Balthazar to get dressed. As soon as she entered, Alice saw a lot of alcohol bottles scattered. To cover it up, Balthazar's father pretended that he was the one who was very chaotic and asked Balthazar to talk to Elis outside. Elis then asked for his help to become a model. Of course, Balthazar refused and argued that he did not want to be a model and pose with other women. Elis began to give up and lied to her boss that Balthazar would come that day. Her friend tried to advise Elis not to lie. However, Elis couldn't because this concerned her career. Fortunately, a while later, Balthazar arrived in between his father. He was immediately directed to style his hair. Once there, he met Elis's friend and told everything, that Elis was only pretending when she was in a relationship with him. Only a few photos in, Balthazar ended his photo session because he was very annoyed at being constantly yelled at by the photographer. He also vented his anger on Alice who had lied to him. The argument was seen by her coworkers and boss. As a result, Elis was immediately fired from her job. Since then, Elis has been confused and not enthusiastic. She realized she had hurt Balthazar's feelings, even though she actually also had feelings for Balthazar. Alice always visited Balthazar on his campus and expressed her regret. She apologized for what she had done to him. Until 1 year passed, Elis now managed to continue her dream of becoming a novelist. She has written a novel that is very popular in the market about her love journey with a man, Balthazar. Then the story ended.